So I'm creating the mechanical sort of interior pieces for the floral installation that's going to be hung on the wall, sort of along the ceiling line. And in order to do this, I've used 3 different pieces. So what we have here, this is some garden netting that I got from Lowe's. I think these are to be used to make like tomato cages and things like that, but they come in like a roll and in sheets, and they're pretty pliable, but it's much stronger than a chicken wire. So then what I've done is I've taken some faux boxwood panels here and layered them under some chicken wire. So I've taken the chicken wire over top of it and I cut this into a more organic shape, and I'm just going around and I'm using a roll of wire to sew close the edges so that everything stays really nice and neat. And then after I have these hung on the wall, I'll just kind of start feeding my greenery in first, and then I'll start layering in some of my florals for it. So Bryn, you want to get a close-up here of this mechanic. And I find, you know, using a wire is just a lot easier than doing a bunch of zip ties, and it holds it as sturdy as I need it to. So this is a pretty rigid shape, so my first insertions are going to be to give it a little bit more interest and tapering. So I'll start feeding that out to the sides, breaking lines up. I don't know if you can see that. Let me adjust my camera here. So very similar to the way that you build out the perimeter. When you start your arrangement, you're going to be doing the same thing with your silk installation. So I've got excellent mechanics and then long lines that will determine the shape of the overall cloud. You want to make sure that you're kind of weaving those stems in through all 3 of those layers of the netting, the framework, and your internal greenery. And for an installation that's going to stay, you want to take a lot of extra time with your insertions, making sure that they're really secure, because this has to basically be indestructible in order to stay up and looking good for years to come on site. Okay, so at this point I have all of my base flowers in. So I've sort of created a little bit of an implied line here with that blue hydrangea. And then more or less, it's really just kind of spot and dot with the pink and the white roses. A lot of that blending is going to happen with my more premium blooms. So I'll design with a little bit more intention with these nicer flowers. And then of course I have reserved some of the greenery so that at the end, after I've put in these cherry blossoms that will really give it a little bit more shape, I'll be able to come back and add in some of those details. So it's just really important that even though you're kind of adding things in at angles so that your stems like weave through, you're turning their heads to give it plenty of dimension coming out. And you also have to think about where this is being hung from. So later on, when I finish it, I will likely hang it up at a higher place so that I can kind of check and see how everything looks from the view of where it will finally be hanging. Okay, so as I'm finishing things up, I don't know if you can tell in the time lapse, but I'm really stopping to check in with the camera or even just a mirror on the other side of you so that you can look for any holes or areas where a good blender flower is needed. So something like this that has both the pink and the white is going to be really crucial here at the end, because anywhere where my eye kind of stops in a bad way and not as an intentional moment of pause could benefit probably from a blender. This is going to make this area right here that otherwise feels really empty and flat and kind of awkward between the white and the pink. It's going to just sort of soften it and feel like an intentional moment. So at this point, it is getting even more difficult to get the flowers in, which that's a good sign. That means everything is really secure and tight. This is as far as I'm going to go with the pre-production. This is not my entire recipe. I've made sure to save 5% of the recipe to add in when it's on site and installed. I also have some little picks of boxwood that once it's up, I will go in and fill in empty holes, come around the sides or the bottom to offer some finishing texture. But again, these are really short and it's better to add those finishing touches on site versus in your shop where you're building this out. A couple of tips that I would also recommend as you're doing this: do not underestimate the amount of time it is going to take to layer this many flowers, and especially because it's not like when you're working with fresh where you can just snip it and stick it. There's a lot of maneuvering, and sometimes you'll need several different gauges of wire cutters to get through the stem. So some rocking back and forth, extra cuts. It does take a little bit longer to work with these stems. The benefit, on the other hand, though, is while this is more expensive and more time consuming than a fresh arrangement, you can really charge a higher price here and justify it because this is an installation that is permanent. It is going to stay in this spa for years to come. Something else as you're working with this that you want to make sure that you relay to the client is how much upkeep an install like this takes, especially in a spa where there's going to be dust and lots of hair product and lots of, kind of things flying around in the air. These will get dirty very quickly. So it's a good idea to even quote them or upsell a service charge of every few months, maybe every 3 months, you come, you refresh it, you use some silk cleaner, you dust them. That way they can make sure that their investment is protected. Either that or just sell them the tools and the products to take care of their permanent installation themselves. A lot of people might just opt to do this to save money in the beginning, but then after they have to start cleaning all of these silks and doing it themselves, they may just go ahead and hire you to come in and take care of it for them.